All right, everyone, going to be breaking down all the top bets here for this Sunday night showdown here between the Denver Broncos and the Washington Commanders. I don't want to say interesting game, but I will say some of the lines that we're getting is a little bit interesting to me. Like 6 points in favor of the Denver Broncos to me is correct, although I could see them end up winning by more than that. And I will say, if that 6 point spread is right, I don't know, this over and under to me seems to be a little bit too high. Now, it's not necessarily going to be like the Chicago game where I'm like, these are just weird lines in general. Like, I didn't really understand what was going on there. Or with the Packers not being the favorites to win against the Detroit Lions. Like, those were two strange ones to me. But like, if we're looking for a bet to be on for this game, I wouldn't mind getting on the Denver Broncos at -6 on BetUS. Like, I think that ends up being a decent spot to get to. That's just the top bet that we're getting there. I don't mind that. Like, I think that would be the best route to go, or just any sort of point spread for them to end up covering. Heck, you could go with the FanDuel line -105 at 6.5. I wouldn't hate that either. I don't think you need to do that. We got MyBookie at -105. We got plenty of other books that are giving us decent lines there. Bovada, if you guys bet there. So we're getting even -10. Like BetMGM, I'd be fine with that at 6 points. I just see them winning by a decent amount, mostly because if you look at the weaknesses that the Commanders have, that's kind of the strength of the Denver Broncos and vice versa. And so it does depend on how well Bo Nix ends up playing, but both teams are coming in off of a bye week. And really, I just think Sean Payton's going to be able to scheme the game properly. Thus, I think the offense is going to look a little bit better. And on top of that, obviously, the Washington Commanders are going to be without Jaden Daniels. But it is worth calling out. They are getting Terry McLaurin back, which is pretty good for them. But we know that Broncos defense has been pretty darn spectacular. And it is worth calling out. Mariota has played a little bit better than, I would say people probably expected, although this is a very difficult matchup for him. So if that passing game isn't able to get going, I don't really expect the Commanders to fully be in this. Again, it's football. Random stuff happens. But I do think at 6 points, that ends up being a pretty solid bet. And so let's go ahead and jump into the best bets here that we are getting in this game. Starting out with the Commanders. We are seeing a lot of their under fantasy scores are going to end up being some pretty solid bets. This one for Jeremy McNichols is definitely an interesting one, very much dependent on how much he ends up playing. If this is a game where the Broncos are playing from behind, logically speaking, you would think McNichols, the better pass catcher among the Washington Commanders running backs, would be on the field the most. That has not necessarily been the case, though. He hasn't really been getting all that much work, just in general. Only 23% of the routes, which is not terrible. I mean, that is something. But if that trend continues, then yeah, him to get under this fantasy score would make sense. And it is worth calling out, guys, like Chris Rodriguez has been the lead running back, started the last two games, ended up playing 45% of the snaps, only 29% of the routes, but still ended up having the most passing plays, which is pretty darn crazy there just in general. He's not someone I think we necessarily need to bet on. I know some people are going to want to get there with him. Just them coming in off of a bye week, I do kind of want to see it. He has been the better running back between like him and Bill Krosky-Merritt. Although Krosky, guys, he's still kind of a big playmaker. He ended up playing 27% of the snaps in their previous game. And like he is still getting a decent amount of work. He still ended up getting 9 carries. So like when he's on the field, he is still getting the ball because, well, he is a big playmaker, okay? The biggest reason as to why Chris Rodriguez is playing more over him is because Chris Rodriguez is the more consistent runner. You know what you're going to get out of him. You're typically going to get, a 3-yard run, okay? If it's there, he's going to get it, maybe even a little bit more occasionally. Whereas JCM, it could end up being a 20-yard rush. It could end up being a rush for -2 yards, okay? They're coming off the bye week. Maybe they just spent some time coaching that up and maybe ends up getting a little bit more work. Now, for the Bears game, I said that, I didn't hate the idea of betting on Swift or Kyle Monangai for one of their unders and then the other one for their overs. That did not obviously end up working out. That was kind of the bad game that we had for the Thanksgiving early games. But overall, guys, ended up going for 16 for 28 for the Black Friday and also the Thanksgiving games. 57%, like we'll take that. I don't hate that same logic here where maybe we do bet on Bill for over his rush yards and then Chris Rodriguez for under his rush yards. That being said, guys, it's not a guarantee. Like this is a tough matchup going against the Denver Broncos defense. I don't know if I necessarily even want to do that. Now, the best bet that we are getting is going to be for Terry McLaurin to get under 9.5 for his fantasy score, which again, like I don't hate that. It is a game in which I do expect the Denver Broncos defense to be playing well. I get that Marcus Mariota has played a little bit better than expected, but I think this is finally a game where how I see it going is kind of how Vegas sees it going, and then the PrizePicks and underdog lines that we're getting are all a little bit too high. So I'm okay getting some McLaurin for under his fantasy score. If he ends up going off in his first game back, I'm kind of okay. Like, I'm okay with that. I think this just ends up being the correct bet. And then the one I don't necessarily love is going to be Zach Ertz for under his fantasy score. Yes, Terry McLaurin is back, and what I'm going to read to you is not necessarily doesn't matter as much, but in the previous game, guys, Ertz ended up getting 8 targets and 84 air yards. He's the only player for the Washington Commanders that like actually ends up getting a decent matchup here in this game. And so I think if we could end up finding like an over bet for him, we would want to do that. I wouldn't hate the idea of getting to him for over 3.5 receptions, but I think you guys can see just based off of the bets that we have coming in for him right now, that's why he's under 8.5 for his fantasy score is a good bet. Okay, we have him at 3.5 receptions and then about 32 receiving yards. So that's at most like 7 points right there. And so that 8.5, just not much. Obviously, with any fantasy score, if they end up scoring a touchdown, that doesn't help us at all for betting the unders. But I don't think we really want to be messing at all with any of the overs. Like the one player I could maybe get to is like Jalen Lane, assuming that he ends up playing about 40% of the snaps. That ends up being a complete guess, so we don't even know if that's going to end up happening, and like we don't have it lines for him as well. So I think it's safe to just bet on a lot of the unders more so than any of the overs. And it's not like we're even getting like a big prop line difference for like Marcus Mariota with his fantasy score. So overall, guys, I don't think we're getting much there for Washington. Let's go ahead and jump on into Denver. Denver, I actually like some of the bets a little bit more so. A player that I like to get over 1.5 receptions is going to be Pat Bryant. Now, on PrizePicks, they currently have him at 2 receptions. You can kind of ignore that. The biggest issue that I have, though, with this bet is really just Sean Payton. Okay, so this could end up being a game in which he sees the weakness in the defense being more with a player like Marvin Mims. And I say it, guys, because in the last game, before their bye week, Pat Bryant played in 57% of the snaps and 63% of the routes, whereas Mims only played in 30% of the routes. This has been something that's kind of steadily been happening throughout the course of the season now, especially lately. Pat Bryant has basically seen over 50% of the snaps now since week 5. Now, he's not necessarily always getting the overs, don't get me wrong there, but if you look at the weakness with the Washington Commanders, it is via the receiver position. And it's not like the targets haven't been there, guys. 6-2, we don't like that there against the Raiders, but that was kind of an ugly game. 3, 4, and 4. Okay, so we like that there. Again, it's a little bit of a guess on him still playing that many snaps. I never fully want to trust Sean Payton, but I do think that ends up being a pretty good bet for us. Now, for PrizePicks, I don't think I want to get to him over 2 receptions just as an FYI. And that's kind of the issue is that some of the bets that we are getting are all bets where it's going to be a decreased payout if you're going to target them. We see Evan Ingram for under his fantasy score is a bet that's popping up, about a 54.87% chance for that to hit. That's not a bet that I like for him. If I were to be betting on Evan Ingram, I'd be betting on him to get over 3 receptions. Okay, the issue here is that we don't, again, know exactly how many snaps he's going to end up playing. He's not playing all that many snaps just in general, guys. Only 41% of the snaps in the previous game, which is basically right in line with what we have seen for him throughout this season. Okay, so the last week prior to that, week 10, 44, week 9, 52%. He's only had one game in which he's seen a massive snap share, 56% of the snaps against the Giants, okay? But he is someone that is playing a lot of the routes, okay? So he ended up having 55% of the routes, which wasn't all that much actually in the previous game there against the Chiefs, but he still ended up with 5 targets for 4 receptions and 33 receiving yards. He is someone that when he's on the field will have a couple of design plays for him as well. So overall, I don't hate the idea of getting to like his over 3 receptions or even over his 24.5 receiving yards, although that does feel like a tight line. Another player that I don't mind is Troy Franklin, who kind of has become the receiver number 1. Now, I do think that Courtland Sutton just naturally is due for a pretty big week here, guys, soon, but I do want to call out the targets for Troy Franklin over the past 5 games. Okay, 7.5. Insane. He's also someone that's not playing like a ton. I mean, he is playing a lot of snaps, but in comparison to Courtland Sutton, not like every snap. He still has at least 80% of the routes, though. So that's really what we care about. And as we can see, that has led to a lot of targets. And so if you were telling me that he is still going to get that same snap share as well as the targets, I would like his over 4.5 receptions. And again, the issue with this bet here is for PrizePicks or underdog betting purposes, guys, which is obviously what I'm showing you guys more so, but I know a lot of other people are betting on different sites, and that would end up being a bet that I like more there. It's not a good PrizePicks underdog bet, is what I want to make clear, because the under has about a 52.5% chance to hit. So obviously we wouldn't like it there. That makes for a good traditional sportsbook bet if you guys are some of that bets elsewhere. Again, I always call it sleeper. If you guys want to place a bet, maybe as long as reception for an over, I don't hate that. We are seeing his receiving yards. We are getting a pretty big prop line difference on PrizePicks. That could end up being the route that you guys go. That has about a 52% chance for him to get over 46.5 receiving yards. And then I did mention Courtland Sutton as well. 3.5 receptions for him. I do think that ends up being a pretty easy bet there. Again, he hasn't been necessarily as involved as I would want him to be. Maybe coming in off the bye week, he gets a little bit more work. And we do need to talk about the running backs as well, guys. RJ Harvey did end up getting a lot of the snaps, 61% of the snaps, ended up with over 10 carries in that game. I don't really want to trust him to have a big game, although I will say, like, his rush yards, I probably would be inclined to get there. That being said, if you wanted to place a bet on someone to score a touchdown, backup running back Jaleel McLaughlin ended up having 2 out of the 3 carries inside the red zone or inside the 10-yard line. He ended up scoring a touchdown last week. I don't know if that was necessarily a fluke, but I did want to call that out. And then lastly, we need to get into Bo Nix, guys. I do expect Bo Nix to have a pretty good game in this game. I just would rather bet on Troy Franklin, Evan Ingram, Pat Bryant, or even Courtland Sutton. That'd be the route in which I go to attack the weakness in the Washington Commanders, which is obviously throwing the football. All right, so going ahead and getting to the bet of the day here. Again, it's going to be more of a traditional sportsbook day, because the bets I like on PrizePicks are not really standard bets. They're going to be watered down bets, and it's just the payouts are just better on other sites. So just calling that out. But Troy Franklin for over 46.5 receiving yards, definitely a clear edge there on PrizePicks. Again, I like him to get over 4.5 receptions. That's a bet if you guys are betting on a traditional site that I think we could end up getting to. And again, I don't necessarily love the idea of getting to Zach Ertz and Terry McLaurin for their unders, especially Ertz. But it is a game in which the Denver Broncos defense has been really good. And so we're kind of just betting on that. And then I don't like, we're betting on 4 pass catchers for their over receptions or receiving yards for the Broncos. Yes, that is the weakness of the Commanders. I will say that's probably a little bit too much exposure to them, but that's just the way I see the slate going, guys. So trying to put our best foot forward. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the coverage. Appreciate you guys being here. Good luck with all the bets that you do end up placing today or tonight for this game. Appreciate you guys being here. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.